Something I'm not a big fan of in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game is floodgates. Context for those that aren't familiar with the term, a floodgate is a card that has an effect to stop you from playing the game to a certain degree, or even at all in some cases. For example, there are 3 card types in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game: monsters, spells, and traps. These are the 3 types of cards we use in order to play the game. But what happens when you start your turn and your opponent flips over these cards? Skill drain. Now, oh no, my monster can no longer use their effects on the field. So okay, 1/3 of my options are completely eliminated from being used. That's okay, I can still rely on my spell cards, right? Well, the opponent's now flipped over Imperial Order. Now, oh no, my spell cards don't work. Now that's 2/3 of the game mechanics completely shut off from me. All I'm allowed to rely on is traps. Traps aren't going to help me right now. In fact, I don't even have any traps in my hand, so I can't do anything. I have to pass my turn, pass back to me, can't do anything, my opponent's won the duel. And I didn't get to play. That's devastating, right? Having your opponent flip over 1 or 2 cards with no significant cost, and now you can't play the game. Now you might think, oh, wait a minute, the restrictions also apply to the opponent, so we're fighting on even ground in this desolate wasteland that's been created. No, that is not the case. The opponent will have those cards in their deck because they have created a deck around that card. Their deck will work despite the restrictions placed on the field. Or in some cases, they've already built a great board, then they flip over a floodgate, they've already sorted their field, and now you've got to fight an uphill battle. Okay, that's fine. They'll probably have a second one. 99% chance they have another macro. Here we go. God, I hate this deck. Keep in mind, my dislike for Floodgate stems more so from the fact that I mainly play the Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel game, because in that, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a best of 1 game, compared to in real life where it's a best of 3 game. I don't like them either way, but you can understand why they're more of a problem in Master Duel than they are in real life. Because in Master Duel, if I don't have the out to an opponent's floodgate, then I simply don't have it, and I just have to sit there demoralized until I lose. In comparison, in real life Yu-Gi-Oh! Oh, I'm playing against a floodgate user. Okay, game 2, side in all of my anti-floodgate cards, Harpies, Cosmic, whatever you want. Now I can deal with their back row. I should be okay. Saying that though, it is one of the most satisfying things to win a duel under the gun of some sort of floodgate your opponent has put on you. They think they've got this duel in the bag, but through clever strategic maneuvering of your monsters, playing a little bit wacky, you can get past their defenses and still end up with the win. That is a great feeling. If I see a Rivalry of the Warlords flip up, I am going to not be impressed because this won't negate it. I have yet to have my Rampage resolve. Like, it's for an event and things. Attributes. Okay, we're locked into darks. 3. It's not enough, I don't think. We're a little bit off. Right, there's a fusion monster in our graveyard. It's not destroyed! He's given us the win! Unless. Come on! It's just not something that is always achievable because not every deck is able to play like that under certain restrictions. Sometimes no amount of skill can get you out of a floodgated field. But M-Pen lets you normal summon 1 more time. Out of all the cards he has, which means he's going to summon? It's going to be Barish Statue of the Winds, which will mean this won't be strong enough to attack over it. This won't be able to be activated. This will do nothing. And if either of these is destroyed, it will do nothing either. Now, to play devil's advocate and be fair, there are reasons why people will justify floodgates being in the game. The argument for floodgates is that with the ever-increasing speed of the game, where opponents can easily OTK you in a single turn or put up a wall of Omni-Negate monsters to stop you from playing just in a slightly different way, a case can be made that floodgates are a necessity to counter or at least slow down one of these 2 extremes. He's not dealing with that, surely. No, I didn't think you would. And of course, we could definitely talk about the problems with like one card starters and omni-negate end boards and things like that, but I think that's a video for a future day. For the time being though, a card like Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity, for example. Currently banned in the real world, I might add, it has the devastating floodgate effect. When this card is synchro summoned for the rest of this turn, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects. Also, the opponent can activate cards or effects in response to this effect's activation. This card wouldn't have been so bad if it was summoned in the way it was intended to be summoned. Good way to push for game. Get this monster out, it's tough to get out. Stop your opponent from responding to it for the rest of the turn, and attack for game or to do as much damage as possible. That's fine. What's not fine is the fact that nowadays it can be cheesed out for a card called Crimson Dragon, getting it out on the opponent's side of the field and stopping them from making any plays before their turn even begins. We'll cover this a little bit more later, but sometimes there are other cards that enable floodgates during the opponent's turn, which makes them really broken. So that's not very fun, right? The fact that your opponents put you in a situation where you just have to pass your turn, and you know for a fact, with how Yu-Gi-Oh is nowadays, they can literally just obliterate you on the next turn. Where's the fun in that? Where's the interactivity? What am I getting out of this that's fun? And to a degree, what is the opponent getting out of this? We didn't have a battle back and forth of epic proportions. It was just literally my opponent saying no to me being able to play. He got his turn again. He beat me. Alternatively, we have a deck like the One Bad Day deck. Full to the brim with cards like Fossil Diner Pachycephalo, making it so neither player can special summon monsters. The Barrier Statues, where neither player can special summon monsters either, apart from very obscure attributes. Or Inspector Border, where now none of my monsters' effects work. If I manage to draw my out, Regeki, after a couple turns of being attacked by these cards and not being able to summon, I activate Regeki, but oh no, they've got a Solemn Judgment face down. Sometimes drawing the out also means that the opponent is slowly waiting to draw the out to my out as well, so it's not great sometimes. Another deck like this is Runic Stun, where a Runic deck is decking you out, while at the same time the stun aspect of the deck, Skill Drain, Goes and Match, Rivalry of the Warlord, Synchro Zone, they're all preventing you from putting multiple monsters in the field to build a board or your monster outs. It's also stopping you from attacking directly or anything like that and using your effects. So it's just, you're having your deck ripped away while being unable to play the game on the field, and your only sliver of hope drawing your out, your Harpy's Feather Duster or anything like that, unfortunately, the Runic deck is just ripped out of your deck before you could even draw it. That's horrific. The negatives for floodgates, in my personal opinion, are they don't require effort or skill to use. You just draw it, set it, flip it over, profit. And typically there is usually next to no or none at all maintenance cost for it at all, so it's pretty much free for the user to play. The detriment of at least hindering both players doesn't usually apply. The way to deal with them might not be in your deck. Again, this is more so for Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. You can't bait or force out a floodgate. You don't know it's there until it's there, and then when it's there, you have to deal with it afterwards, which usually includes drawing the out, which isn't very interactive if you ask me. A already good meta deck that is also able to use one of these cards with little inconvenience means you're going to be fighting an uphill battle, even more uphill. While a bad deck that uses one is still a bad deck, but is being held up by the floodgates. And of course, the big one, they just simply can stop you from playing the game at all, which is not fun. At the end of the day, that's just my opinion. So what I did is I did a poll to ask, how do you feel about floodgates in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game? Do you think they're good for the game? I think they're bad for the game. Out of the 15,000 plus people that voted, roughly 60% voted that floodgates are bad for the game, with 40% saying they're good for the game. So, while the majority agree that floodgates are bad for the game, it's not an overwhelming majority. You'd think 90% people saying they're bad for the game, whereas 60%, very close to 50-50 there. After reading the comments, people seem to be of the consensus that they are a necessary evil. They admit floodgates suck, they're horrible, but with the abundance of multiple omni-negate boards and really fast popping off decks, we kind of need them to keep those decks in check with this ever-growing fast game. And I mean, yeah, the alternative of the opponent building a board that just stops every action you do is almost the same as just stopping you before you do it. The only difference really there is at least you get to attempt to do stuff. in a sense, but I guess it's a false sense of doing something because it still gets interrupted anyway. Some other comments in the poll I thought I would bring up are, I think there's a level of acceptable power for a floodgate. Konami just doesn't know how to make one of that power. A floodgate should slow a deck down, not prevent it from making plays until you draw that out. Floodgates can be good for the game, but as they are now, they only really serve as a way to either make already strong decks stronger, or gimmicky bad decks get an unearned win because they won the coin toss. Floodgates, to be good and viable, should have to do a better job of forcing the people who use them to also have to suffer under their effects. They exist to slow down a game, but are being used to stop any playing of it to begin with. The exact same problem that modern OTK and combo strats have, where the goal isn't to enjoy playing the game, it's keep the opponent from playing the game as much as possible. So the only real issue floodgates make is the exact same problem the rest of the entire game has had for literal years. In a sense, overpowered floodgates, one-card starters that lead to multiple generic Omni-Negate boss monsters, is much more a symptom of how fast and power-crept the game is now. However, despite this, I am still going to say I don't think floodgates are healthy for the game at all. Because there is technically a solution to the latter problem. Your opponent's playing a modern deck that is super fast compared to your current rogue deck. You just wanted to play Cyber Dragons, or Vehicroids, or I don't know, Ancient Gears, anything like that. It's just too slow nowadays, so what am I supposed to do? Do I slow them down with a floodgate? Unfortunately, the answer is you need to get onto their level. You also have to play a deck that is modern, has that kind of speed and stuff. This is more so a competitive point of view, obviously. If you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel in competitive mode, unfortunately, sometimes it's just the way the game's gone. Old decks now are rogue for a reason. They're just not as fast and they can't keep up, and just one bit of interruption can ruin your day. So it sucks to not be able to play your old favorite decks and things, but the solution to that as well on Konami's end is to boost up these old decks to make them competitively viable at the same level as modern day decks, rather than bringing other decks down with floodgates. You know what I mean? By the way, I learned this sad truth the hard way because on my Twitch every month I play a rogue deck and try and take it against the meta, and oh boy, it is hard to play a nostalgic deck in modern day. Sometimes they don't do so bad, sometimes they do really bad, and sometimes they do alright. Whereas floodgates, there isn't really a fix for them. You either draw the outs or you don't. So I think they're not great. I'm sure you can all see where I'm going with this. Ban every single floodgate in Yu-Gi-Oh! Well, no. It's not as simple as that, unfortunately. We can't do it. There are some floodgates out there that if your opponent flipped it over, you'd think, oh, that's not so bad. Imperial Iron Wall, for example, that prevents either player from banishing cards. A lot of decks, they wouldn't really care, so it's not really a devastating floodgate or anything like that. But it depends on the times. If the top 5 most powerful decks at the moment all need banishment to make their deck work, now that card has become a really substantial floodgate. So, like most things, it depends on the times with these floodgates. And again, you can make the case that the Vehicroid player wants to play this floodgate to bring that player down to their level so that they can play on a more equal footing and stand a chance against them. But I do have to say this again. Why should we be nerfing better decks to bring them down to a lesser deck's ability? Why can't we boost the lesser deck up and make it better? I think that's the real solution to the problem. But of course, we're making decks so fast now, we're all across the board, everything's going to be insane. And let's not forget as well, some of your favorite anime characters also have played floodgates. That's right, the main man himself, Yugioh, he played Swords of Revealing Light. This is technically a floodgate. It has a lingering ability and it does something that stops you from playing the game in a certain way. It's a floodgate. I doubt you would find anybody nowadays that would say this is a overpowered card and should be banned. I don't know how people felt about it back in the day when it was first around and everything like that. But yeah, it's been power crept out of relevance as a floodgate. But if we're going to do a blanket ban of everything, yeah, I guess it technically would go with the rest. Finally, the big one, which is my main reason for not blanket wiping floodgate cards altogether, is that some floodgates are part of archetypes. Some of them are the main boss monsters of archetypes as well. Some of them are just cards that exist within archetypes. I would feel really bad to take those things away from certain decks, as devastating as some of them are. Some of them are insane, and I wouldn't mind them being banned, and some of them have been banned, but I don't think it's fair to just punish every deck if it's part of their archetype. So I think it's fair as long as you have to use the archetypal monsters or specifically have to play the floodgate monster within that archetype to make it work. Because at least then you know, oh, I'm playing against the Shaddoll deck. Better watch out for El Shaddoll Winder. It's going to restrict the amount of summons I can do per turn. I'm playing against Necrovalet. Better keep track of what's in my grave and everything because they'll lock me out the graveyard or maybe even stop me from special summoning. They do have that ability. Oh, I'm playing against Fluonderies. Better not special summon monsters into attack position because their Fluonderies and Emperor will negate my effects if they're in attack. Playing against Thunder Dragons. Oh, I better be careful how many cards I add to my hand because Thunder Dragon Colossus will stop me from adding any cards from my deck to my hand. Oh, I'm playing against Heroes. Well, I better not send any cards to the graveyard because this monster won't like that. Or use monster effects on the field because this monster won't like that. Or use spell cards because this monster won't like that. Or use any cards at all because this monster won't like that. My God, I didn't realize how many floodgates were in a hero deck. That's surprising. The moral of this video, in my personal opinion, is I don't think floodgates are good for this game, in my opinion. I kind of would like them all to get banned apart from archetypal ones, but we can put them all down to one. And just for the record, I am not saying floodgates are the only issue with Yu-Gi-Oh! There are quite a few different issues where we can either embrace them, and that is just Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, or we can fight against them and hope they get rid of them. So just keep that in mind. This is all just for a little bit of fun. A hypothetical world where I could just literally just ban all floodgates, and then we could really limit down all the Omni-Negate generic monsters and sort of maybe not slow down the game now because we've already come too far. Maybe we can just sort of bring all slower decks to the same level. Every deck is fighting at the same power level, just in different ways. The only way to be fair in this floodgate ban list is to just be as cruel as possible. Ban all non-archetypal floodgates, no matter how weak they are. You never know when they'll come back in relevance and things like that. Just give a blanket ban to all generic ones, and all archetypal ones you put to one. And then you do a case-by-case basis for archetypal ones. Is this broken? Can this be abused in other decks and things like that? Okay, it can. We can ban that one. I'll be honest, you'd have to be a madman to go through each and every floodgate card and individually decide whether it should be banned or not. So let's do it right now. Floodgate Purge. We're going to try and ban as many floodgates as I actually can remember. I'm going to forget a lot, but there are a lot of them, so you're going to be surprised by that. They get a ban if they're generic. They get a limit to one if they're part of an archetype. Keep in mind, some floodgates are floodgates, but not really floodgates. For example, Notoria Beastbarky and Exterio, these are floodgates. They're devastating, but they do have a cost that you have to pay every time you use their effects. But the cost is so minimal, it doesn't feel like a cost. But technically, I guess you could say they're more of a control than floodgates. So we're going to give those a pass for now. They can stay at 3. Also, a card like Masquerade. This causes you to take 700 damage if you do anything. Every time you do something, you take 700 damage. Is that a floodgate? Because technically, you can still play normally, so it's not hindering the way you play. But I guess the real floodgate is the fact that you only get to have 13 actions before you're unable to do any more actions. So, do we count this as a floodgate? I'm going to say no. So by that logic, all life point burn floodgates, we're going to give a pass. None of them are going to get banned by my books, because then we'd be going through like the Trickstar monsters and Dark Room of Nightmare and things like that. We don't want to do that. Plus, Masquerade feels fair. It's devastating, but it's fair. So, with that all out of the way, let's go! Amano monsters can activate their effects except spirit monsters. Technically, this is part of a spirit series of cards. It's not really an archetype, but it kind of is. So we're going to limit it to 1. Oh, look! It's already limited to 1. Perfect. Next, we have Amophage Goliath. While you control an Amophage monster, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. That's if it's in the Pendulum Zone. If it's in a Monster Zone, neither player can special summon monsters from the extra deck except Amophage monsters. Technically, it's part of an archetype. Let's put it to 1. Why not? Archlord Christia, when it is on the field, neither player can special summon monsters, is technically part of an archetype, so let's put it to 1. Arch Nemesis Protos, when this thing's on the field, they declare a monster attribute on the field, destroy all monsters on the field with that attribute. Also, until the end of the next turn, neither player can special summon monsters with that attribute. Most likely, they'll go for dark. You don't get any dark monsters on the field on the turn it's summoned or the turn after. It's part of an archetype. Unfortunately, put it to 1. Same with Arch Nemesis Eschatos. It's not as good, don't get me wrong. Declared 1 monster type on the field, destroy a monster on the field with that type. Till the end of next turn, I play a special monster with that type. It's a floodgate, so put it to 1, that's the rule. The barrier statue cards, they're not part of an archetype, they're just a series of cards, so we can ban them all without hesitation. One of them's already banned, but the problem is with them, as new archetypes come out, they can get them out easily, they'll become an issue. Just ban them all. Get them all out of here. Consecrated Light. Neither player can normal or special summon dark monsters or declare attacks with dark monsters. It's specific, but it doesn't appear to be part of an archetype or anything. It's not a big issue, but we can ban it anyway. Why not? Chaos Hunter. Your opponent cannot banish cards. Not a huge deal. Obviously, it depends on the format and everything like that, but it's not part of an archetype. Chaos archetype. It's a bit vague. Maybe we could keep it. Limit 1 or ban. I'm gonna limit 1. I guess it's part of the Chaos archetype. Denko Sekka. While you control no set spells or traps, neither player can set spells or traps, nor activate spells or traps that are set on the field. Not a massive issue again, but it's not part of an archetype, so we can ban it. Destiny Hero Plasma. Negate the effects of face-up monsters while your opponent controls them. It's a floodgate monster, but is part of an archetype, so we can limit it to 1. Djinn, Releaser of Rituals. If a player ritual summons using this card, the other player cannot special summon monsters while that ritual monster is face-up on the field. Ooh, we should ban that because I don't think it's part of an archetype. I don't think. Oh, look, it's already banned. Perfect. Dimensional Shifter. Any card sent to the graveyard is banished until the end of the next turn. We don't like that. We can ban it. Droll and Lockbird. Send this card from your hand to the graveyard. For the rest of this turn, cards cannot be added from either player's main deck to the hand. It's not part of an archetype, so technically we can ban it. Flying Sea. You can special summon this card from your hand to the opponent's field in defense. The control of this card cannot exceed summon. Not a huge issue, depending on the deck that you play against, but it's a part of a series, not an archetype, so we technically can get rid of it. Empen, while this tribute summon monster is in the monster zone, your opponent can activate the effects of special summon monsters they control in attack position. It's part of an archetype. It's already at 1. We'll put it to 1. Fossil Diner Pachycephalo, one of the staple Floodgate monsters, technically a part of an archetype. Its ability is that neither player can special summon monsters. Now, you'd think I'd say put this to 1, but I'm just going to say ban this card because the Fossil archetype doesn't use this monster as part of its effects. It does nothing to do with what this card does. Also, in the anime, it had a completely different effect. Anyway, so I think we can make a special case for Fossil Diner. Let's just ban it because I don't like it. Put it to 1 if you really want to, but I think just a blanket ban. Ice Barriers are a funky archetype. They have a lot of Floodgate monsters in their archetype. The biggest one is General Ryo of the Ice Barrier. Its effect is any effect that is activated by an effect monster that was on your opponent's side of the field, the owner must discard 1 card or the effect is negated. It's a devastating card. But you got loads of other ones as well, like while you control another Ice Barrier monster, your opponent can attribute summon. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, your opponent can activate the effects of monsters in the graveyard. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, defense switching monsters your opponent controls cannot change their battle positions. There's tons of cards like this. I don't know why the Ice Barriers became a Floodgate deck, but it's just one of those things. Gimmick Puppet Nightmare has a detrimental effect to the owner that summons it. So if you play this in a Gimmick Puppet deck, it locks you into only being able to summon Gimmick Puppet monsters. However, some cards like this can be abused by other cards, and they'll be special summoned to your opponent's side of the field through an effect, and now they are the ones suffering from a detrimental effect that you should have. This card is banned because of that. It was being abused by another card. It was being put on the opponent's side of the field. It's hard to balance that. But the way you balance that is you stop giving monsters that can summon your monsters to your opponent's side of the field with their effects. That is the solution to that. And if that was the case, this could go back. But at the time being, this should stay banned, just for the time being. And any card that summons monsters to the opponent's side of the field with their effects from your graveyard, hand, or deck or anything, this shouldn't be a thing. Inspector Border, it's limited to 1. I say a full ban. I just do not like this card. It's got a wacky effect as well. Neither player can activate monster effects unless the number of monster effects that player has previously activated that turn is less than the number of monster cards types currently on the field. Ritual Fusion, Synchro exceeds Pendulum and Link. If effects activation was negated, it still counts towards the total of that turn. Only count effects that were activated while this monster was face up on the field. Basically, you need to have a bunch of different extra deck monsters out in order to use effects, but most likely this monster will be paired in a Fossil Diner deck, so you're not getting out extra deck monsters, so you're not doing anything. Basically, ban it. Invader of Darkness. Your opponent can activate quick play spell cards. It's not part of an archetype, so YOLO, let's just ban it for the sake of it. Jinzo, one of the oldest Floodgate cards. Trap cards and their effects on the field cannot be activated. It's part of a archetype. So Jinzo, you get a pass, don't worry. But you do get limited to 1, even though I know you're not broken or anything like that. I'm sorry about it, but we're limiting all archetypal Floodgate monsters to 1. So, sorry, I know that's your whole gimmick, but gutted. King Tiger Wangu. When a monster with 1400 or less attack is normal summoned or special summoned, destroy those monsters with 1400 or less attack. Basically, it's floodgating what monsters you can put on the field. It's not part of an archetype. Sadly, you get banned. It's an old card, though, to be fair. Nightmare Corruptor Ibli. This is a card that purposefully summons itself to the opponent's side of the field, and when it does, you cannot special summon monsters except Link monsters, which can be a nightmare depending on what your opponent also does to you as well. So you know what this card should do? It should go to 1 because it is technically a part of an archetype. Kawaki Meru Drago. Neither player can special summon light or dark monsters. It's part of an archetype. It's probably has never seen much play, to be honest with you, or at least I haven't seen it very much. Put it to 1. Kaiku, an old card. Your opponent cannot banish cards from either player's graveyard. It's good to stop Called by the Grave from hitting your cards, but at the end of the day, it's not part of an archetype. I'm sorry, Kaiku. You gotta get banned. Lightning Rod Lord. Neither player can activate spell cards during the main phase 1. Not part of an archetype. Let's ban it. Again, case-by-case basis, you could make the assumption some of these would actually be fine in certain metas and stuff, but we're hitting it all. We just don't care. This is a purge. Majesty's Fiend. Neither player can activate monsters' effects. Get that out of here. All of the Fiend series of cards, ban it. Naturia Bamboo Shoot. While this card remains face up on the field, your opponent can activate spell or trap cards. Woof. I would love to ban that, but it's an archetypal monster. We'll put it to 1. Ocean Dragon Lord, Karyu Shin. I actually played a Umi control deck. While this card is face up on the field, each player can only control 1 face-up non-water monster. If a player controls 2 or more, they must send the others to the graveyard, so they can only control 1. It's a Floodgate boss monster archetypal. It is the only reason to play a Umi control deck, so putting to 1 seems horrific because it's like its win condition and everything. It's an archetypal thing, so it gets to go to 1, but putting it to 1 does hurt the deck a lot, but gutted. Sorry, we've got new rules. Spell Canceller. Spell cards and their effects on the field cannot be activated. Negate spell effects on the field. It's basically Jinzo, but for spell cards. It's not part of an archetype, so luckily this one can get a ban. Thunder King Ryo. Neither player can add cards from their deck to the hand except by drawing them. It's not part of an archetype, so it can get banned. Thousand Eyes Jellyfish. I don't think it's part of the Relinquished archetype, but its ability is your opponent must play with their hand revealed. Not a huge detrimental thing, to be honest with you. You can make a case it's not that bad, but since I don't think it's part of this archetype, it could just get banned. Why not? Who cares? Vanity's Fiend and Ruler, and we'll get to Emptiness in a little bit. Fiend. Neither player can special summon monsters. Hard ban. Your opponent cannot special summon monsters. Hard ban. None of that, please. Zap Mustang. Each turn, the turn player can only special summon a number of times up to their number of attacks conducted and reach the damage step this turn. What the hell? What a wacky card. That doesn't look like it's part of an archetype, I don't think. Ban it, I guess. For Shaddoll, we have El Shaddoll Winder. Each player can only special summon monsters once per turn while this card is face up on the field. It's an archetypal monster. We can put that one to 1. The other one that can go to 1 as well is El Shaddoll Anonatilis. I think I've got the name right. Neither player can special summon monsters from the hand or graveyard using spell/trap effects. Not the most devastating thing, but it's in an archetype, so we'll put it to 1. Invoked Caliga. It's part of an archetype, so it has to go to 1. Each player can only attempt to activate 1 monster effect per turn, and each player can only attack with 1 monster during each battle phase. Part of an archetype, it gets to go to 1. Ojama Knight and Ojama King. When these cards are on the field, they take up either 2 slots of your main monster zones or 3 slots. Both of them out in the field means you can't summon any monsters to your main monster zones. They're part of an archetype, so they can both go to 1, but still, they're not that devastating, but they can be if they get everything else. And there is an upgraded version of this monster, which we might get to. Talk about broken, the last warrior from another planet. If this card is special summon, destroy all other monsters you control. Neither player can summon monsters. You can't even normal summon. Woof. Ban it. Thunder Dragon Colossus. While this card is on the field, cards cannot be added from the main deck to your opponent's hand except by drawing them. It's already limited to 1. It's part of an archetype, so yeah, that's absolutely fine with me. Thousand Eyes Restrict. Other monsters on the field cannot change their battle positions or attack. It's part of an archetype. It has been banned in the past, so we'll just put it to 1. Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity. When this card is summoned, the opponent can activate cards or effects on the field. You summon this during your opponent's turn, and then they just can't play for the rest of the turn, or at least not from their hand to the field anyway. It's already banned, but it's technically a archetypal monster, so by my logic, we should put it to 1. However, it has been proved to be such a hindrance that it has been banned, so I'm going to listen to them. That's one of those case-by-case bases. This has been abused by another card, so it had to get banned. They could get rid of the abuser, which I think is the real solution, which is Crimson Dragon. So, you know, could get rid of Crimson Dragon. It's allowing the synchro summons of these tough monsters a bit too easily, so I think this is the real troublemaker. By that logic as well, might as well bring up Albion the Sanctifier Dragon is one of those monsters that is summoning detrimental monsters to the opponent's side of the field, so this is another one that's enabling naughty plays, just saying. Abyss Dweller, this card was so good against Telemans. It was like the only way you could really counter them, but it's technically a floodgate monster. You can attach 1 material for this card. Your opponent can activate any cards or effects in their graveyard this turn. This is one of the problems with banning some floodgate monsters. Now, Telemans would be even stronger at their prime anyway. But, yeah. Is it Abyss? I don't think Abyss is an archetype. Evil Swarm of Fion, part of an archetype. While this card is an exceeds material, level 5 or higher monsters cannot be special summoned. Part of an archetype, it's got to go to 1, but it gets to stay in the game. On the field, and has an exceeds material, level 5 or higher monsters cannot attack. Isn't that similar to what we just went through with the Evil Swarm monster? It's part of an archetype, so it can go to 1. Number 16, Shockmaster. Not part of an archetype, it's just a number monster. It was devastating. It has been banned. It has a lingering floodgate that you get to pick. Once per turn, detach an exceeds material from this card. Declare monster, spell, or trap. That type of card cannot be activated, or if it's a monster, it cannot activate its effects until the end of your opponent's next turn. Woof. Deserved that ban. Another naughty one, True King of All Calamities. Technically, it's part of the True Draco archetype and True King monsters. So, okay, there you go. But it got banned. This is one, through my logic, would go to 1, but it was so devastating, it had to get banned. Is this another case-by-case basis? Yes, this one does deserve to remain banned. Speaking of, Rongo Miniad, number 86 Heroic Champion Rongo Miniad. It was part of the Heroic Champion archetype, which aren't that good, but this thing was just stupid. Basically, you could cheese it out with a bunch of materials, and then while it was on the field, once per turn, you can destroy all spells your opponent controls. Your opponent cannot normal or special summon monsters. It's unaffected by other card effects, gain 1500 attacks, and cannot be destroyed by battle. The big one is your opponent cannot normal or special summon monsters. They get this out first turn. That's it. You can't really play the game. And you can't deal with this monster in any way, shape, or form. A Traffic Control. If your opponent controls 3 or more monsters, they cannot declare an attack. Not part of an archetype. You can put it to 0. Corridor of Agony. Monsters that were special summoned from the main deck can activate their effects. Their effects are negated, and they cannot declare an attack as long as they remain face up on the field. Let's just ban it, shall we? Deck Lockdown, this is a gruesome one. Neither player can add cards from the deck to their hand, except by drawing them. Monsters cannot be special summoned from the main deck. Destroy this card during your second standby phase activation. You'd think that would be fair, but the problem is, you've probably lost in that time. Ban it. Here's the classic one, Dimensional Fissure. Any monster sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Not part of an archetype, so we can ban it. Domain of the True Monarchs is part of the Monarch archetype. We have no cards in your extra deck, and you are the only player that controls a tribute summon monster. Your opponent cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. It's an archetypal floodgate, so it can go to 1. Hidden Temples of Necrovalley. It's part of the Necrovalley archetype. It can go to 1. Gravekeeper deck isn't very strong anyway, but this card, neither player can special summon monsters except Gravekeeper monsters. This is the main playmaker in a Gravekeeper deck. Cards in the graveyard cannot be banished. Negate any card effects that would move a card in the graveyard to a different place. Negate any card effects that change types or attributes in the graveyard. It feels a shame to put this to 1. But it is a floodgate, so we're going to put it to 1. So, gutted. Look, there's going to be some collateral damage to some decks every now and then. It's the price we pay. Kaiser Colosseum, already banned, and it would be banned in my books as well. If there's one or more monster on the field of the controller of this card, his or her opponent cannot place monsters on the field if his or her number of monsters would exceed the number of monsters the opponent has on their field. Basically, if your opponent has 1 monster on the field, you can only have 1 monster on the field at max. Level Limit Area B, change all face-up level 4 or higher monsters into defense. It's not part of an archetype, can ban it. Level Limit Area A as well, change all face-up level 3 or lower monsters to attack position. We might as well just ban that as well. Messenger of Peace, monster with 1500 or more attack, cannot declare an attack. It does have a maintenance cost to keep it on the field, 100 life points per turn, so you can use it 79 times in a duel with 8,000 life points. The cost is so low for maintenance that I'm going to say this technically counts as a floodgate, so we can ban it, why not? Mystic Mine, one of the most notorious floodgates in all of existence. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, your opponent can activate monster effects or declare an attack. If you control more monsters than your opponent does, you can activate monsters' effects or declare an attack. Basically, what would happen, people would put this on the board and just both players would just keep ending their turn until one player got something that they needed. It was not a healthy time for the game. Prohibition feels like a weird floodgate, but technically you are declaring a card name, and for the rest of that duel, that card can't be used. So yeah, you're floodgating a very specific card. I don't know if I feel like this classes as a floodgate. It kind of does and it kind of doesn't. We'll ban it though. We'll give it a ban. Why not? Quiet Life. If any player normal summons or sets a monster, that player cannot special summon monsters that turn. If a player special summons a monster, that player cannot normal summon or set that turn. So if your deck requires you to normal summon and then pop off, you're screwed. If your deck requires you to special summon, get a monster you can normal summon, then put that in the field, you're also screwed. You're floodgated, so we're going to ban it, unfortunately. Secret Village of the Spellcasters. If only you control a spellcaster monster, your opponent can activate spell cards. God, this is a horrific thing to go against when you can't counter it. So yeah, we can ban it. It's not part of technically an archetype, so it can go. Summon Breaker. During the main phase 1, if the turn player successfully conducts their 3rd summon of a monster this turn, it becomes the end phase. Your options are to only summon so many monsters in your main phase 1, or go into your main phase 2, but then you lose your battle phase, so it's just like, ugh. We'll ban it. Swords of Revealing Light, you activate it, then its effect lingers on the field for 3 turns, making it so that your opponent cannot declare an attack. So you're floodgating attacks for 3 turns. Technically, it's a floodgate, so yeah, we have to ban it. It seems wacky, but then the rules. Terminal World Next. Cards cannot be placed on the field if it would give any player more than 3 monsters or more than 3 spell or trap cards on their field. Technically a floodgate. Don't think it's part of an archetype anyway, so ban it. Zombie World is a funny floodgate. All monsters on the field and in the graveyard become zombie monsters. That is technically a floodgate ability. Also, neither player contributes to monsters except zombie monsters. This isn't a part of an archetype, but it does aid almost every single zombie deck, so it's a weird one. It can either go to 1 or banish. Next we have And the Band Played On. Neither player can special summon monsters with the same level as those they control. Neither player can special summon monsters with the same rank as those they control. Not part of an archetype or anything like that, so we're gonna ban it. Anti-Spell Fragrance. I don't like this card. Both players must set spell cards before activating them and cannot activate them until their next turn after setting them. Basically, it slows the game down so your opponent basically gets their turn before you can play anything. Not part of an archetype, so we can ban it. DNA Surgery and DNA Transplants. All face-up monsters in the field become a type you declare. All face-up monsters become an attribute you declare. Technically a floodgate, so technically we can ban it, even though it's not that devastating. But it's limiting your opponent's plays, I guess, so yeah. Icebarn. If a non-water monster is normal or special summoned while you control a water monster, change that summoned monster to defense position. Basically, every time you summon anything that's not a water, it goes to defense. Woofed. Ban it. Final attack orders, continuous trap. All face-up monsters on the field are changed to attack position, and their battle positions cannot be changed. Ban it. Not that devastating, but still gets a ban. Here's a big one, Gozen Match. Each player can only control one attribute of monster. Send all other face-up monsters they control to the graveyard. Basically, if you're playing a deck with one attribute, and your opponent's playing a variety of different attributes in their deck, they're going to be really have their day ruined. This gets banned. We might as well do its Paramour as well, Rivalry of the Warlords. Exact same concept, except each player can control one type of monster. Send all of the face-up monsters to the graveyard without a type, basically. This can also get banned as well. Grave, the super ancient organism. All level 6 or higher special summon monsters on the field cannot attack or activate their effects. We're going to ban it. Gravity Bind, level 4 or higher monsters cannot declare an attack. Obviously, these cards aren't as strong as they used to be, especially with Link monsters and Xyz monsters that don't have levels now. But still, it's a floodgate. We're going to ban it. Harpy's Featherstorm. Its effect is if you control a winged beast monster until the end of this turn, it lingers the entire turn. Negate any monster effects your opponent activates. Woofed. And also, if you control a Harpy monster, you can activate this card from your hand. That is a devastating card to go against, especially against Floowandereeze. It's part of an archetype, though. No, we have to put it to 1. Imperial Iron Wall. Neither player can banish cards. It's not part of an archetype. We can ban it. We got 3 Imperial cards here. We have Imperial Iron Wall. Neither player can banish cards. Not part of an archetype. We can ban it. It's not that devastating, but it depends on the format, doesn't it? Imperial Order. This one definitely needs to get banned. Negate all spell effects on the field. It does have a maintenance cost, but 700 life points, and you'll never have to worry about spell cards again. That is not a cost. And the last one is Imperial Custom. Face-up continuous traps cannot be destroyed. That is not an issue at all, but we're just banning it all, so Imperial Custom gets banned. Monster cards cannot... It's a funky, cool card. Shame to get rid of it, though, but yeah, it's got to be banned. I'm sorry. Light Imprisoning Mirror, Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. Negate all dark monster effects activated on the field and in the grave. Negate all light monster effects activated on the field and in the graveyard. We can ban both of these, no worries. Face up on the field, negate its effects during the turn that monster was special summoned. If an effect monster is special summoned in attack position, change it to defense. That's Nightmare Fuel, and it's persistent, so we can ban it. Macrocosmos, while it does have the Floodgate ability, that while it's face up on the field, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. It is part of the Primordial archetype, Helios, the Primordial Sun, all of those things. So it's got to go to 1. It can't get banned. Mask Restrict, neither player can tribute cards, not part of an archetype, unless you count the Maskov archetype. I think we can ban it. I think a ban is fine. We've got 3 Drain cards. We've got Skill Drain, the literal embodiment of a floodgate. Negate the effects of all face-up monsters while face-up on the field. But their effects can still be activated, but they don't really. So basically, yeah, for a cost of 1,000 life points, that's insane. We're going to ban it. Soul Drain. Monsters that are banished, as well as monsters in the graveyard, can activate their effects. We're going to ban that one as well. Mind Drain. Effects of monsters in the hand cannot be activated. We're gonna ban that one as well. They're all gone. Mistake. Neither player can add cards from their deck to their hand, except by drawing them. Not part of an archetype. Let's give it a ban. Narrow Pass. Both players can only normal summon up to 2 additional monsters on their side of the field, up to the 2 that they already have. So, yeah. We're gonna give it a ban. Power Sink Stone. Each time a monster effect is activated, place 1 Spellstone counter on this card, maximum 2. While this card has 2 Spellstone counters, face-up monsters on the field can activate their effects, and their effects are negated. At the end phase, all the Spellstone counters go away. So basically, you get 2 things per turn. It's getting banned. Can you believe how many different floodgates there are in the game? And I haven't even found all of them. This is just as many I could actually find. Requilate. If a monster is normal or flip summoned and it's level 4 or lower, negate its effects until the end of this turn. If a monster is special summoned and it is a level 5 or higher monster, negate its effects until the end of this turn. Also banish it when it leaves the field. Royal Decree, negate all of the trap effects on the field. Let's just ban it. Why not? Stygian Dirge. Reduce the levels of all monsters your opponent controls by 1. A weird floodgate, but it can really mess with synchro players and people that rely on specific levels and stuff. So yeah, we've got technically part of the Stygian archetype. Summon Gate. Each player can special summon a maximum of 3 monsters from the extra deck each turn. It's not part of an archetype. We're going to ban it. Summon Limit. Neither player can summon more than 2 times per turn. It's already at 1, but we're going to ban it. Again, I'd just like to mention that, like, a lot of these cards you probably haven't seen or you may never see them, but it always depends on the format at the time. So we're just going to ban them all. Then no one can ever have them. There's enough other cards in the game. It's fine. The Monarchs erupt and negate all effects of all face-up monsters on the field, while those monsters are face-up on the field, except for tribute summoned monsters. Woofed. The Virus cards I'm going to class as a Floodgate because they linger and they're devastating. Now, there's probably loads of monsters I missed. For example, Scareclaw Triheart here. When it is on the field, all face-up monsters on the field are changed into defense. Kashtira Arise Heart causes any card sent to the graveyard to be banished instead. Kashtira Shangra Era, every time a card gets banished, it will remove one of your monster zones or spell and trap zones. If it manages to remove all of them, then you're just not playing the game anymore. There are probably a bunch more cards in the game like that, but there's surprisingly so many that I couldn't find them all for this video, and that'll do me for now. I think we've kind of got everything there. And with that, that was my Ban All the Floodgates video. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. This is half for fun. I don't feel that strongly about it if that came across. Like, I wouldn't mind some of these things to be banned. It's just sometimes when you're playing Master Duel, it can get a bit on top of you if you play too many in a row kind of thing. It can get to you and just like, I need to make a video about this just to rant for a little bit. And of course, there's a couple more problems with Yu-Gi-Oh! At the end of the day. Are they solvable? I'm not too sure. Should we just embrace them and make them a part of the game now? Maybe, I guess that's just sometimes the case. But yeah, let me know your opinions in the comment section below. Was there any Floodgates that I missed in my big list? Let me know as well. But other than that, thank you for watching. Catch you later.